Well, good afternoon to most of you in these US of A's. And we are just waiting a second while people come out of the waiting room and into the presentation. So we'll just give that another second. Then we will be on our way. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of the HOA Living Network. Been doing this HOA thing for 27 years now. 27 years ago, I was elected president of my homeowners association. And 25 years ago, approximately on April 12th, we started our company. Our first company was FCS Property Management and became FCS Rental or FCS Community Management. And now there's FCS Rentals and all of our fun associates. And so it's been a great journey. Look for information on our social media channels coming out on April 12th. And all of our offices across the country will be celebrating with a special treat or something you can come by and pick up. And it is my pleasure to teach this month's topic of Governing Documents 101. This is one of our annual repeats. It's one of our most requested events every year, and it's because this is the heart of what we're doing. So I look forward to getting to Governing Documents with you in just a moment. I want to remind you about our schedule for this year. Now, something a little unique next month is we're going to pre-record different state legislative updates for our key states. And so look for that. We're hoping target of about April 17th, but it'll be by the end of April. It'll be recording with some guest people involved in legislative action committees and or attorneys to talk about state specific. So if you're in Minnesota, you don't have to learn about Utah. If you're in Utah, you don't have to learn about Arkansas, et cetera, et cetera. We'll have little mini vignettes on the legislative happenings in your state during this legislative session. So welcome to all of our companies and friends, those who are clients and those who are not, are just guests. We're glad to have you. There's some other ways to connect with us and get additional education and refreshers, such as these AES series. A couple QR codes for you there, or you can just go to our website. On the website, you simply go to the board tab, and there's a drop down for education, and you can see view classes or recordings that take you to our YouTube channel and all of the many, many hours of association board member education. Once again, thank you to Max Maintenance in Utah for sponsoring this month's program like last and offering a 10% spring cleaning special. Reach out to them at any of those ways across the bottom, from the Arizona border up to the Idaho border, from Colorado to Nevada. We've got Max Maintenance can take care of your needs. Want to highlight the Community Association Institute National Conference is coming up on in May, the first full week of May. The exact dates aren't on this slide, but I believe it's the 8th through the 11th. And there's a QR code in the URL to go learn more information. It costs about $800, but there are some scholarships for homeowner leaders to get free registration. I believe the deadline for those closes tomorrow. And so if you're interested in that, reach out or go to the CI website and you'll be able to find that. The keynote for that conference is Bert Jacobs from the Life is Good company. So really excited. I have some of the Life is Good clothing and items. And so it's a great corporate company. Excited to hear from him. All right, what are we going to talk about today? Well, what is Governing Documents 101? It's everything basically on the hierarchy of authority. And I'll just go to that slide. So remember, we've got our hierarchy of authority, right? And we have a lot of documents and laws and case law and statutes and things we decide in minutes of meetings, that all these things form this authority gobbledygook of things for our associations, right? But we have to have a hierarchy of authority. And as you go up the triangle, that are the things at the top are the things that rule over everything else. So if the law says you will allow small satellite and internet receiving devices on the exterior of units, you can't have something in the CC&Rs that says those are prohibited. Or if you do have that language, as often old documents do, it's invalid, right? Because something higher up has made the rule. Just the same on our CC&Rs. If it says we're a no pet community, we cannot pass a rule saying, okay, yeah, we understand no pets, but if it's under 15 pounds, then pets are allowed. You can't make a rule that is trumped by something higher up the hierarchy of authority. In the same vein, your CC&Rs say you're a no pet community. Federal law says that emotional and support animals are allowed in most circumstances. So you can see that even though your CC&Rs say no pets, you might have to have pets for those fair housing reasons. There are several federal laws. I mean, there's thousands, and there's several that are of importance to us in the association industry. The first one being the just mentioned Fair Housing Act. This is what allows age-restricted communities, both the 55 plus and the 62 plus. 55 plus has to be 80% or greater. 62 plus has to be 100% of the residents. But fair housing says there will be no age discrimination in housing in the United States. Well, because of Fair Housing Act, there are those special caveats for 55 plus and 62 plus. Reasonable accommodations and modifications. As we talked about before, most associations are not subject to the ADA, Americans with Disability Act. Americans with Disability Act, very important, but that is for businesses. Some associations cross the line and turn themselves accidentally into a business, or they're just big enough that they have a lot of business operations. In both those cases, if you accidentally turn yourself into a business, or you have a tennis club, you have a swimming pool that you rent out to the public, or a clubhouse or a restaurant, then you're subject to the ADA. Otherwise, associations are not subject to the ADA, but they are subject to Fair Housing Act, which requires reasonable accommodations and modifications when requested. For instance, I live in a townhome style building that is a condominium. I have 8 stairs from the sidewalk up into my unit, and I now am wheelchair bound, and I need a ramp instead of those stairs. Even though it's common area to the association has to allow me to install that ramp so that I can access my unit. That's a reasonable accommodation modification. Now, notice I didn't say the association has to pay for the ramp. they have to allow the ramp, and the person with the need, according to Fair Housing Act, is the person who would pay for that modification. The association has very limited rights to maybe architecturally describe how that ramp will look. And it's a good idea for the association and the owner or resident with the need to engage in conversations during the process, because the act will allow them to build just a simple wood or metal ramp that is functional, but might not be to the architectural standards or the ambiance that the association's trying to keep. Well, maybe the association comes in and says, hey, we're going to contribute an extra 1,000 or whatever so that it looks like the buildings or whatever standard you're trying to do. So there are some opportunities for partnership and even paying, but there's no requirement of an association to pay for those modifications. Pet service, comfort animals, talked about that, and disruptive residents. Last month, we also talked in great detail about the protections that come: hoarding, dementia, paranoia. These are all protected disabilities that sometimes your residents in your units have, that oftentimes can adversely affect the neighbors around those units. These are very tough situations, and not right. They're not great. And we talked last month about external ways to get help for disruptive residents and using county resources and those kind of things. And it might not have been an AES. I've taught so many things last month, my apologies, but use resources, municipal resources and state resources available to help you in those tricky situations. The Americans with Disability Act, ADA, we were just talking about, you know, if you do make money from the general public, not from your homeowners or residents, but from the general public, you might cross over and make yourself have to follow the ADA. Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, Freedom to Display the American Flag Act, the OTARD, over-the-air reception device rule, is the one we were just talking about with the satellite and internet devices. The Bankruptcy Code, obviously, Service Members Civil Relief Act. Several federal statutes. This is not by any means a fully comprehensive list. State laws, then. So we have federal laws and we have state laws. And there's can be a lot of state laws to follow depending on our state. But pretty much each state, and I've just highlighted some of the states where you are possibly viewing us from today. Arizona has a Condominium Act and a Planned Communities Act. Every state has a Nonprofit Corporate Act. Then there's several other acts in Arizona that affect people living in condominiums and planned communities. Arkansas, still kind of new into the association game. The only thing they have is the Horizontal Property Act, and then, of course, the Nonprofit Corporate Act. Idaho is kind of all over the place. They're starting to consolidate. It is really the Wild West up north of Salt Lake, where I am today. There is a Condominium Property Act, and then miscellaneous sections in 55, 45, 26, 67 that affect associations. And so you got to be mindful of all those different things. There's their Nonprofit Act too in Section 30. Louisiana has a Condominium and Homeowners Act. The Business Association and Nonprofit Act are running the business of the association. Utah has the Condominium Act and the Community Association Act, plus our Nonprofit Act, but there's also a very big section in 57.146 that governs the reinvestment fees. That's in the real estate title and transactions section of the code. And actually, we need to add a new one in here because we just passed something in the county assessors section on assessing property taxes in Utah to clarify what's been pretty known, but all counties have not wanted to follow, that common areas are exempt from property taxes. So we'll get that added for next time. Minnesota has Condominium Act in two parts, and then the PUD part's the Common Interest Ownership Act, and then the Nonprofit Act. Sorry, got the cough today. So if you're in another state joining us today, there's a great QR code there. That'll take you to CAI's resources, once again, Community Association Institute, in every state, and there's a link to all the state laws that affect community associations in your state. So when we say governing documents, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about a bundle of documents that is everything else that is not federal law, state law, city code, or case law, right? Decisions made by the court go up there too. They are the recorded map, the platter plan, our declarations, master deeds, or CC&Rs. Master deed is a term used in the co-op world. Articles of incorporation, bylaws, and our rules, regulations, resolutions, which are really all kind of the same thing. So what is going on with where can we find these documents if we don't have them readily available? The recorded are recorded. In the West, we call them county recorders. As you get towards the Midwest and the East, it's the land records. Different version, but it's where, you know, if you record something on your lot, your title, your mortgage, any of that stuff, whatever office that is where plats are recorded and the CC&Rs, and sometimes the bylaws. Not all states require bylaws to be recorded, but we highly recommend it as they're an integral part of the governing documents of the association. And by them being recorded, that serves notice to everyone of what version and the specifics of each of those documents might be. Articles of incorporation are filed with the Department of Commerce, it's called in some states, with the Secretary of State, some states call it, or with the state business entity department. Wherever you go, if you're setting up a new business in your state, articles of incorporation are setting up the business that is your association, and those are filed, not recorded. Rules, regulations, and resolutions generally are not recorded or filed. They just exist out there, which is what makes them hard to find sometimes. But I'm going to talk, we've talked about in previous sessions, I'll talk about some instances where you might want to record a resolution of the association and why you would do that. All right, so once again, top of the pyramid are federal laws, state laws, even our cities and counties and parishes might have code that affect associations in those areas. And of course, case law. Case law, decisions made by judges filter down and affect associations. For instance, a big one right now is the Corporate Transparency Act, known as CTA, that has our industry all in a buzz, but a court, a district court back east, has ruled that the government has stepped out of bounds when it comes to the Corporate Transparency Act. We're trying to understand if that applies to all businesses. It's not geographic, but it might not be all businesses. Of course, CAI is working, as we've talked about, to get the Corporate Transparency Act to get associations exempted. But unless there's some changes, that's not going to happen. So let's look at the recorded map, plat, or plan. They're not three different types of documents. They're the same thing, just called different things in different places. And you can see it in the background of the slide there. It's our meets and bounds, how big our lots and areas are, where the streets are located, where the common areas are located, where the limited common areas are located. Is it a private street, public street? All those kind of things are on the map, plat, or plan. It defines where our lots are, where the common areas are, exclusive use common areas, no limit common, utility easements, road ownership, all the things I just mentioned. So in a condominium building, how does this look? Well, it looks different, obviously, because it's vertical. So on a plat map, like the one in the background here, there would just be the picture of the whole grounds. And then the second page would show each building. Each building would have a page, and it would cut up and show kind of where all those units are located in that building. Declaration Master Deed, or CC&Rs. This is all, traditionally declaration was for condominiums, but you will see things like it called the declaration. You'll see it called the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. That's where CC&Rs come from. Sometimes it'll be called the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. In the co-op world, not a lot of them, but that's the master deed. All the same document, right? This is the constitution of your association, and is the crux of the authority that the association has, right? It's going to detail property rights, conditions or use of those properties, homeowners' rights and responsibilities, or members, and associations' rights and responsibilities. You'll find the architectural standards, the design guidelines, information about pets, swimming pools, other amenities, whether at your home, individual lot, or a communal, parking, noise, home-based businesses, rental restrictions, our nightly rentals like Airbnb and Verbo prohibited. Is there a 6-month lease required, a 1-year lease? All those kind of things are found, or should be found, or referenced in the declaration. The Articles of Incorporation, once again, this is a document, and it defines the purpose of the association, how it's structured, and certain powers. It's a short document. Most states have a quick fill-in one-page form these days. You don't need multiple articles and sections anymore. And basically, you're notifying the state and the world that you are a business, and the state is granting you authority to act as a business. So you can sign contracts, open banking accounts. Big thing, right, is you want to limit your liability as a board member serving in a community, and you do that by having indemnification through articles of incorporation. So the entity is sued, not individual board members. Now, I know individual board members get named all the time, and that is an attempt by plaintiffs to try to get around the protection that comes from articles of incorporation. And you're going to be protected as a board member unless you've gone off the rail and you're acting as an individual, not in your capacity as a member of the board. Being a member of the board doesn't give you free rein to do anything and everything, thinking, oh, I'm protected by the association, the articles of incorporation, and that indemnity, no, you might be found that you acted outside of that scope. So just do the things, fiduciary duties and duty of care and loyalty, and there's nothing to worry about. The bylaws. Now, some states are similar to Utah, which actually says, and this is back on the plat and the CC&Rs, because sometimes the plat has fine print wording and verbiage that are covenants, and they're not found in the CC&Rs. So in Utah, plat, the map, plat, and plan, and the CC&Rs are read as equally together. They're read together. So bylaws, whether recorded or not, are the second from the bottom in authority on our hierarchy of authority chart. What do the bylaws do? What should they do? They should just talk about the meetings, annual meetings, board meetings, committee meetings, special meetings, elections. How do people get elected to be on the board? And then, are there officers? What are their jobs? What are their titles? Are they from the board? The bylaws are administration of the association based. They are not, they should not have covenants in them. Well, what happens is we see, right, on our CC&Rs, a lot of times, it's a 2/3, maybe even greater in some states, percentage to amend anything in the CC&Rs. So the CC&Rs say we're a no pet community. The board wants to change it and allow small pets. They definitely can and have a vote to try to amend the CC&Rs, but they got to get 2/3, not of those who are in attendance at a meeting, but of every single owner. And that can be a daunting task, of course. Well, they look at the bylaws and they're like, the bylaws only require a majority of the owners to change them. So they're like, let's allow pets and put that into the bylaws. Well, once again, it's in contradiction to the CC&Rs. You can't do that. But sometimes people and boards will say, let's put it in the bylaws, and it doesn't belong in the bylaws because it's a lower threshold. It's easier to get it passed. Then we have our rules and our regulations, our resolutions. And these are all the little procedural things that boards decide. Everything should be done in resolution format, right? That's our recommendation. That's industry best practice. And it's really just a formalized way to adopt a rule or regulation. When we teach our community managers and those new into the industry, we use this GASP as the 4 kinds of resolutions that we have in our associations. We have general resolutions that are for routine events. We're adopting the budget. Administrative, we're going to hold our board meeting on the first Thursday of each quarter at the city library at 7 p.m. Special resolutions deal with just one owner, right? And so this is if we have, say an owner has a requirement that trash cans have to be behind the house, not behind a fence or something, but actually behind the house. And you have one lot that has just a cliff and isn't able to do that. So then you could do a special resolution that a variance of that rule for that one owner, or even a delinquent homeowner who's been delinquent for a year and you're going to waive the late fees and interest. That's really a special resolution. It's an individual owner one-time thing. And then our policy resolutions are for owners' rights and responsibilities. Here's the rules for the pool. It opens at 6 for lap swimming, and then 8 o'clock for free swim. It closes at 10 p.m. each night. You may bring a maximum of 4 non-resident guests with you at any given time. The pool will be closed. daily from 10:30 to 11:30 for cleaning and maintenance, whatever. Here's our clubhouse rules. This is how you reserve the clubhouse. There's a deposit, a use fee. You're responsible. All that would be a policy resolution. And your manager can help you get into a good groove of any time you make policy or make a rule that you turn it into a resolution format. So here's some examples, right? Your collection policies, your design and landscape guidelines. I love the way that Overlay did their fence rule. They made it a Q&A or an FAQ that answers questions. And basically, all right, they have hundreds of homes out at Overlake, and they don't want every single fence approval to have to come through. And so they said, hey, if you do these things in this way, you're pre-approved. We have the right to go back afterwards if you didn't do it right, but otherwise you're pre-approved. I like that format too. So why would you ever record it? And we've talked in previous situations a couple of times on why we would record a resolution. The example that's on here is Belmont Condos, which is a student housing condominium complex next to a big university, and they have to have approval of that university to rent to students. Well, every unit of 216 is a student rental, and so everyone has to follow those procedures. They didn't want it. Some people would buy, the original buyers all knew, but when there was resales, people were like shocked that they had to follow these rules, and so they recorded this resolution to state that it is what it is, and that there's some big fines if they don't do the annual paperwork in a timely manner. Another example is we had an old historic condominium building in a downtown area that had windows that were over 40 years old. The building's on a common boiler system, but because the windows were so old, wood framed, a lot of cold air from the winters coming into the building, which costs the utilities to go up. So the board approved that a resolution that every single window in the community, owners had 5 years to change all the windows in their community, which is about $10,000 per condominium. And they wanted everyone to know, to remember, but they didn't want any buyer who came in year 4 and the windows hadn't been changed. They didn't want that buyer to be surprised. And they also wanted the buyer to know that they were not going to get an additional 5 years from when they buy. The 5-year deadline is from when the resolution was passed. So they recorded that at the land use records so that it pulls up during title search and when they're buying the units, so there's no questions. So there's a lot of information here, and some of it's written in legalese, all these governing documents. So how do we ensure that we use them and understand them, and more importantly, understand them correctly? So first read it all. If you're bored, that's really kind of your duty. You need to read. And then if you don't understand, talk to your community manager or your attorney, a particular section. That's the consulting piece. And then remember what's in those documents in every decision you make. Make sure you uniformly enforce and then communicate. So let's go through them one at a time again. Get to know your governing documents by reading them. Use the help of attorneys to change them, community managers to help you with resolutions and things you need to change. And before you make any major substantial changes, always get the feedback of the homeowners. Now, some state laws, remember state laws are at the top of our hierarchy, require all homeowners to be involved, even for rulemaking. A lot of places, though, rules and resolutions can be passed just by the board, a majority of the board. So know what yours is, but for instance, in Utah, if you're in a PUD, you have to give 15 days notice that the board's going to talk about it. You have to give owners the opportunity to talk to it before the board passes it. The owners don't vote, but you have to give them those opportunities. In a condominium, you don't have to do that currently. It's not the same rule. But it's best practice anytime you're going to do a major change or something that is going to maybe affect what someone was previously able to do and now won't be able to do. Hold town halls, get feedback, explain, be transparent about the process as you're going along. Yeah, and you gotta, right, when you're doing, you can't pass a resolution, a rule via resolution that says the US flag can only be flown on federal holidays. That would be against the federal United States Flag Act. And so you can't do a rule that would put that kind of limitation. And I remember a news story here in Utah, maybe about 8 years ago, 10 years ago, where it made the news because the president of the association, this is a self-managed association, sent everyone with the flag up. It bugged her for some reason, and she sent out violation letters to all those people. Well, it gets you on the news real quick when you do things like that. And she was defiant, even in an interview with the news. She said, no, and they need to come down. They don't have permission to have them up all year. But she was wrong. And then communicate all before, during, and definitely whenever something is approved. I highly recommend, as a companion to this AES, the intersection of business governance and community AES from last year. And there's a QR code, take you right to it. Looks like it's about 1 hour long, and it goes nicely into that discussion. Yeah, I mean, this says the value of your association depends on your consistent and unbiased enforcement of rules. And yeah, the studies show that association property values are 4 to 5% higher because they're in an association, and that part of that is because of the rules. A great majority of those who live in association appreciate the rules and like the rules. I live in an association myself because I like my grounds being taken care of for me instead of me. Grounds. I live like on 1/10 of an acre. So, but I like the landscaping taken care of, and I like to know that the community is going to look nice, and that I don't have to get into personal beefs with neighbors for not doing something because I'm in an association. So most homeowners do appreciate those rules, and really that consistent and unbiased enforcement of rules is what's most important. Well, that got us through our presentation today, and I would like to open up, if you have a question, to please go ahead and raise your hand, and we will help you unmute and try to answer that question for you. Not seeing any hands go up. And so thank you for joining us today. We appreciate the time that you put into making your community better. And we love to do these education sessions, whether you're our customer or just a friend of the company or just someone involved in the industry. If you are a fan of these, once again, if you are serviced by one of these companies we're featuring this month, please go and give a 5-star review on Google. That helps us. We have to have 5-star reviews to counteract every 1-star review for people that are upset that they moved in a community with CC&Rs. Typically is what happens. So thank you. Once again, we will try to drop our state legislative updates sometime around April 17th, between the 17th and the 30th. 17th might be a little optimistic. We appreciate you and all you do and the service you do for your communities, and we look forward to sharing the state legislative updates with you next month, and then seeing you for another regular AES in May. Thank you and have a beautiful spring.